The moment my own father told me to get out was the moment everything changed, and what happened next will shock you. My name is Avery Morgan, and the last thing my father ever said to me was, "If you walk out that door, don't come back." But I didn't slam the door. I didn't cry. I just picked up my bags and left. Because I already knew something he didn't. I was never coming back. It's funny how one sentence, one moment can split your life in two. That night, standing in our cramped New Jersey dining room with the old clock ticking louder than usual, my entire world cracked. The plates were still warm, my mom's roast still on the table, and my little brother still pretending not to listen. But I had just told them the truth, my truth. That I wasn't going to college, that I wasn't applying anywhere, that I was turning down my acceptance to Columbia. Why? Because I was building something of my own. A company, a dream, my dream. And in our house, that was blasphemy. See, I didn't grow up in a family where you followed your passion. I grew up in a house full of blueprints for perfection. My dad, Marcus Morgan, was a former Marine turned attorney. Every morning at 5 a.m. he ran 3 miles. Every night dinner was at exactly 6:15 p.m. No screens at the table, no interruptions, just expectations. My mom Denise taught advanced calculus at a local prep school and reminded us weekly that no mistake goes unpunished in the real world. And then there was me. The wasted potential. The girl who liked wires more than words code, more than college. I didn't hate education. I just couldn't breathe in the box they built for me. At 13, I built my first app, an auto-reminder system for my mom's students who forgot their assignments. It wasn't pretty, but it worked. By 15, I was already troubleshooting for small businesses in our area, upgrading POS systems in coffee shops, designing basic booking systems for hair salons. I didn't do it for the money, I just loved the problem solving. But when I told my parents I'd made over $4,800 in one summer building back-end tools for local vendors, my dad didn't even look up from his newspaper. He just muttered, "Imagine what you could do if you applied yourself at MIT." It didn't matter what I'd already done. It only mattered what they had dreamed I'd do. So when senior year rolled around and the other kids were fighting over early decisions and Ivy League interviews, I made a decision no one saw coming. I said no. No to Columbia. No to the scholarship offers. No to the plan they had written without asking me. And yes to a bare-bones office space in a friend's basement, a second-hand desktop setup, and a web development toolkit I'd spent 2 years refining between homework and exhaustion. That night, I laid it out to them. "I'm not going," I said. "I'm launching a full product in 3 months. I've already got 2 paying clients and I've saved up $6,300 from freelancing. I don't need college to do what I do best." The silence was deafening. Then Dad stood up. And that's when the sentence came. "If you walk out that door," I walked. Not fast, not dramatic, but I walked. And that might sound reckless. But here's the thing, sometimes the boldest thing you can do isn't shouting back. It's refusing to fold. It's choosing your own voice even when the people who raised you won't listen to it. And maybe, just maybe, you're watching this right now and you've been there too. You ever said no to a path that everyone else said was guaranteed? What did it cost you? And was it worth it? Drop it in the comments, I'm reading everyone. Because that night wasn't the end of my story. It was the beginning of the only chapter I ever wrote without permission. And trust me, it only gets wilder from here. If you've ever had to walk away just to stand on your own, hit that like button, and let's take this journey together. I wasn't trying to be brave. I was just trying to breathe. After leaving home, I took the PATH train into Manhattan with nothing but 2 duffel bags, my beat-up laptop, and a paper folder labeled V1 Avery Codebase. That was all I had. No apartment, no bed, no backup plan. Just a 19-year-old girl who'd just been disowned for dreaming outside the blueprint. I didn't even cry the first night. I was too busy scanning Craigslist listings and praying my debit card didn't get declined at the bodega. Eventually, I landed in a tiny room in the Bronx, barely wide enough to open both arms. It had no AC, a flickering ceiling fan, and a sink that groaned every time I turned it. But it had a lock, a floor, and a door that didn't lead back to my parents' rules. That was enough. I bought a second-hand air mattress and set up my office on a milk crate under the only window. My desk, a wooden plank propped on cinder blocks. My office chair, a laundry basket flipped upside down with a pillow on it. And yet, that room became my headquarters, my sanctuary, my battleground. Every morning I woke up at 6 a.m., brewed instant coffee over a plug-in kettle, and opened my laptop like it was a portal to a world that still believed in me. I started cold pitching businesses again, small ones, local ones. I offered to build their systems for cheap, or even free, just for testimonials. It was humiliating. Half of them didn't respond. A few asked what school I was attending. And when I said I wasn't, some flat out ghosted me. One guy even replied, "No degree, no thanks. Come back when you've got credentials." I stared at that email for 30 minutes. Not because it hurt, but because I already knew how to solve his back-end issue in 3 lines of code. But I didn't argue. I didn't beg. I got back to work. That week, I made $75 coding a calendar integration for a yoga studio in Queens. The next, I earned $150 building an inventory tracker for a craft beer bar in Brooklyn. I survived on peanut butter toast and cup noodles. I didn't turn the heater on unless I could see my breath. I skipped meals to pay for hosting. I wasn't building a startup, I was surviving a war. And still I refused to call home. Not even once. Because I knew what they'd say. That I looked tired. That it wasn't too late to come home and be reasonable. That if I just admitted I was wrong, everything could go back to normal. But I didn't want normal. I wanted real. Real work, real clients, real freedom. And then came my first crack of light. Her name was Elena Park, owner of a tiny plant shop in Flatbush. She replied to one of my emails at 2 a.m. "If you can build a POS system that doesn't crash every time someone scans a succulent, you're hired." She paid me $600 up front. I nearly screamed. That job changed everything. Not because of the money, but because she treated me like a professional. No questions about my age. No doubt in her tone. Just trust. I built her an elegant, bug-free system in under 2 weeks. When she launched it, her sales doubled the first weekend. She sent me a thank you card with a gift card to a coffee shop nearby, and a handwritten note, "Don't ever let them make you feel like less just because you chose different." I still have that card. It sits on my desk even now. That project led to 2 referrals, then 5, then 10. Word spread quietly underground about a girl in the Bronx who builds clean, smart systems on a budget. I wasn't a name yet, but I was in the game. And when I finally stood in front of my crooked mirror one morning, dark circles under my eyes, hoodie, 2 days unwashed, I didn't see failure. I saw someone fighting, not to prove them wrong, but to prove me right. Because sometimes it's not the world you have to convince. It's the part of yourself still whispering that you need permission. Have you ever had to start from scratch with nobody cheering you on? Tell me where you're watching from and how far you've come. I want to celebrate that with you. This was only the beginning. The storm hadn't even hit yet. People think rock bottom is dramatic. It's not. Sometimes rock bottom looks like a Tuesday afternoon in a freezing room staring at your bank app while your ramen boils dry on the stove. That was me. 3 months in. Rent was due in 9 days. My last client hadn't paid yet. My laptop had started making this awful buzzing sound and my wrist ached from coding 14 hours a day. I hadn't heard from my parents. Not even a "you alive" text. But the real crack came from somewhere smaller. A job posting. It was for a junior back-end developer position at a flashy new tech startup in Midtown. 6 figures. Full benefits, company retreats. They needed someone motivated, creative, capable of thinking outside the box. I hovered over the apply button for a full hour because I could do the job. Easily. I had the skills, the grit, the receipts, but I didn't have a degree. No resume worth printing. No fancy internship at Meta or Google to toss around. I closed the tab. Then I closed the laptop. And I cried. Not because I wanted that job, but because in that moment I felt like every line of code I'd ever written, every night I stayed up testing functions, every invoice I fought to get paid, none of it mattered in a world that only respected paper. And that's when I made a vow. If they wouldn't open the doors for me, I'd build my own damn building. The very next day I went back to my whiteboard. That idea I'd been keeping tucked away, afraid to touch, because it felt too big, too ambitious. I started sketching it out. A streamlined modular back-end solution for small retailers. Not a product for consumers, not a basic POS system, but a real tool, one that could track inventory, manage employee schedules, handle seasonal promotions, sync with payment processors, and offer real-time data analysis. Big stores had this tech, but tiny shops, they were left behind. That was my market. That was my mission. I called it Backline. Catchy. Maybe not. But it fit. Because this wasn't about the spotlight. It was about supporting the people doing the work behind the scenes. I rebuilt everything from scratch. Slept 4 hours a night. Watched tutorial after tutorial to fill the gaps in my knowledge because no, I didn't know everything. I never pretended to. But I learned. Fast. I worked until my hands went numb. Then I worked more. And by mid-February I had a demo. It wasn't perfect, but it was real, functional, smart. I emailed it to every contact I had, every small shop I'd ever helped, every cafe, florist, local bookstore. I personalized every message. 1 reply came back, then 2, then none for 3 days, then 7 more, until 1 email stopped me cold. Subject line, interested, can we talk Monday? It was from the owner of a local bookstore chain in New Jersey, 3 locations. They wanted a meeting, a demo. They were looking to replace their outdated system and thought maybe, just maybe, this could be the answer. My hands shook when I read it. This wasn't a side gig. This was a real contract. I borrowed a blazer from my roommate's cousin, polished my sneakers, practiced my pitch in the mirror until I could say it in my sleep. And when I walked into that tiny office behind the bookstore, I didn't lead with apologies. I led with data. I showed them the dashboard, the real-time tracking, the integration with their suppliers' APIs. I answered every question with calm, measured clarity. I didn't stammer when they asked where I went to school. I said I didn't. I went to work. 2 days later, they signed the contract, $15,000 for full implementation with $5,000 paid up front. I sat on the subway ride home clutching that check like it was glass. Because maybe it wasn't Columbia, but it was mine. And that mattered more than anything. What was the first win that made you believe in your own path? Was it small? Was it private? Tell me about it below. This community isn't just watching. We're walking beside you. Next stop, scaling. And a storm I never saw coming. The day that check cleared, something shifted in me. It wasn't about the money. I mean, yes, finally being able to pay my rent and buy groceries that weren't just canned beans and 99-cent noodles was a miracle. But it was something deeper. It was the first time I didn't feel like I had to explain myself. I didn't have to prove that my work mattered or that my choice was valid. The results were right there in a signed contract, in a functioning system, in a team of bookstore employees who no longer had to battle with glitchy software every time someone bought a paperback. That was the day I stopped thinking like a freelancer and started thinking like a founder. I rebranded Backline into something more scalable, something more serious. I called it Lineform. Short, bold, sharp. A name that felt like a real company. Because it was. And from that moment on, everything I did had one goal: get Lineform into the hands of as many small business owners as possible, those who'd been ignored, overlooked, dismissed, because their storefront wasn't wrapped in neon or venture capital. But the journey wasn't clean. Far from it. By month 6, I'd made just under $30,000 in total contracts, barely enough to cover expenses, let alone dream bigger. I was working solo. No team, no assistant, no mentor. Just me and the quiet hum of my fan during 2 a.m. code sprints. Then came DevFest. It was a local developer meetup in Brooklyn, something I almost didn't attend because I was exhausted and had exactly $7 left in my checking account that day. But something told me to go. Maybe it was curiosity, or maybe deep down I just needed to remember I wasn't building this alone. That's where I met her, Mara Jennings. Tall leather boots, purple buzz cut full of opinions and zero apologies. She was demoing a community engagement plugin she'd built for neighborhood orgs, and we happened to be standing in the same sad coffee line. "You building anything?" she asked, like it was the most natural question in the world. I told her about Lineform. I showed her my phone mockups. She asked hard questions about architecture, about security, about latency, and I answered every single one without blinking. She smiled and said, "You need better UI." I blinked. She laughed. "Don't worry, I can help." And just like that, I had a co-builder. Mara didn't care that I didn't have a CS degree. She didn't ask for a title or a salary up front. She just said, "I want to work on something real with someone who gives a damn." That night, back in my apartment, we stayed up until 3 a.m., redesigning the dashboard flow. Her fingers flew across the trackpad while I reworked the back-end schema. We didn't need to talk much. The code was our language. That's when Lineform really started to take shape. We added features, intelligent restock alerts, revenue trend graphs, auto-sync with Shopify. I built the system, she polished it into something people wanted to use. We launched a beta sign-up page. Set a cap at 100 users. We hit that number in 3 days. 3 days. No ads, no investors, no media coverage, just word of mouth. And people hungry for tools made for them, not just for the venture-backed elite. And that's when I knew we were building something that mattered. But here's where it got personal again. Because success has a way of echoing into places you thought were silent. 2 days after we closed our first $50,000 licensing deal with a co-op grocer in Pennsylvania, I got a text. "Mom, hope you're doing well. Just saw Columbia's fall term is starting. You sure you don't want to reapply still time?" Still time. For what? To shrink back into a shape that never fit. I stared at that message for a long time. And then, maybe for the first time, I didn't feel the need to answer it. Not because I was angry, but because I'd finally built something that didn't need their permission to exist. And if you're still watching this, maybe you know what I mean. Maybe you've built something felt, something lived, something that no one else really understands. But you know it's real. That's enough. Drop a comment if you've ever had to outgrow someone else's idea of who you're supposed to be. I'm reading every single one of them because this community isn't just about stories, it's about seeing each other. Lineform was real, but the next storm was personal. The email subject line read "Reproposal, expansion inquiry from Haven and Cohen." At first I thought it was spam. I didn't recognize the name and the logo at the bottom looked too polished. But when I clicked it open, my pulse quickened. Haven & Coers wasn't some tiny neighborhood store. They were a regional lifestyle retailer with 22 locations up and down the East Coast, everything from eco-friendly home goods to boutique grocery items. I'd walked through their flagship store in Manhattan years ago, back when I couldn't afford anything, but still liked to look. They were everything I wasn't: established, shiny, reputable. The message was simple. "We've been following Lineform's progress via some of our smaller vendors. Would love to see a demo and discuss potential integration." I blinked at the screen, then reread the sentence 6 more times. This wasn't just a client. This was a shift. A chance to go from a side-stage startup to playing in the big leagues. I texted Mara, "Check your inbox now." 2 hours later, we were on a video call with their director of operations, a woman named Leslie, who wore blue light glasses and didn't blink once during our entire 40-minute pitch. We walked her through Lineform's back-end interface, real-time reporting features, and system flexibility. She asked brutally smart questions, and for the first time, I didn't feel like I had to fake confidence. I was confident. We were delivering something better, faster, more intuitive than anything on the market for small to mid retailers. Leslie ended the call with, "I'll be in touch after I run this past our board." I should have been thrilled. But I was terrified. Because I knew what this meant scale. And scale meant risk. We didn't have a full-time support team. We didn't have onboarding staff, legal counsel, or even a standardized contract for a company this size. Hell, we were still working off Trello and shared Google Sheets. And still, I couldn't stop smiling. Because after everything, after the ramen nights, the code crashes, the silence from my parents, I was here, on the edge of something real. But not everyone was happy about that. 3 days later, I got another email. This time from my younger brother Jonah. Subject: just a heads up. He'd heard from Mom that she and Dad were deeply concerned about me, that they'd discovered I hadn't filed for FAFSA or re-enrolled anywhere, that Dad said I was throwing away my life to play house with an imaginary company. Imaginary. The same week, I'd signed a $72,000 partnership pilot with Haven and Cobers. My father called my company Imaginary. I closed my laptop and stared at the ceiling for a long time. And then I did something I hadn't done in months. I called him. He didn't answer at first. When he finally picked up, his voice was clipped. Avery. "Hi, Dad," I said. "Just wanted to let you know I'm not playing house. I'm running a company. I employ 3 part-time contractors. We're about to onboard one of the largest retailers in the region. And we're profitable." A pause. Then, "And what exactly do you think that proves?" My voice didn't shake. "That I was right to leave." I hung up before he could answer. I didn't cry, but something inside me closed like a door finally shut. He wasn't going to celebrate me. He wasn't going to come around with time. He wasn't even curious. He just needed me to fail to confirm his own beliefs, and I couldn't give him that anymore. That weekend, I took the first real break I'd had in over a year. Mara and I walked along the boardwalk at Coney Island with greasy fries and too much sun. We talked about product features and hiring strategies, and what it meant to build something our parents didn't understand. "You know what's wild?" Mara said, licking salt off her fingers. "They'll probably only believe it's real when Forbes tells them it is." I laughed, but something in my chest ached at how true that was. Still, I made peace with it that day. Not everything needs to be proven. Some things only need to be lived. And if you're still with me, watching, listening, wondering what your next move should be, let me whisper something into that space where fear usually lives. You don't need their permission, just your own. If you're building something no one claps for yet, I see you. Tell me what you're working on and where in the world you're tuning in from. This community. We don't need permission either. Haven and Cohen said yes 2 weeks later, and Lineform would never be small again. When the Haven and Cohen contract was finalized, everything changed quickly, violently, beautifully. It wasn't just a bigger check or a prestigious name on our site. It was a turning point. Suddenly, we weren't just that scrappy team from the Bronx. We were a verified vendor for a high-profile chain with regional influence. That meant press inquiries. That meant LinkedIn messages from recruiters who'd once ghosted me. That meant investors, dozens of them, suddenly trying to grab coffee and talk potential. We didn't say yes. Not yet. Because Mara and I made a promise early on: no outside money unless we were ready. Unless it served the product, not our pride. But that didn't mean we weren't scaling. We were fast. I hired 2 full-time developers, both from underrepresented communities who had been passed over by the usual hiring pipelines. One was a single mom who coded while her toddler napped. The other had taught himself Python after dropping out of high school to take care of his grandma. I didn't care about resumes. I cared that they saw the work for what it was: a mission. We moved into a co-working space in Lower Manhattan. Nothing fancy, but it had strong Wi-Fi, good coffee, and most importantly, room to dream bigger. And that's when we launched Lineform 2.0, a complete overhaul. With cleaner UI, modular dashboards, plug-and-play integrations for third-party logistics and live analytics. It wasn't just software anymore. It was a toolkit for independence. For the underdogs of retail. That release pulled in 34 new accounts in the first 2 months. Revenue tripled. Our beta users started sending messages like, "I've run this bakery for 15 years and this is the first time I feel like I'm not behind. My wife and I cried when we saw our quarterly report. We've never had numbers like this. You made something that sees us. It was overwhelming in the best way. But just as we started to breathe a little easier, the past came knocking again. This time, it came through the door. One Monday morning, I arrived early at the office to prep for a product demo. The sunlight was pouring across the conference table, coffee brewing. Everything was perfect. And then my phone buzzed. Unknown number, area code 908, New Jersey. I knew that code. I answered on instinct. Avery? It was my mom's voice, tight, cautious. Your father lost his position. The firm's downsizing. He didn't tell you. She paused. I didn't either, but things are hard right now. He hasn't said it, but I think he's scared. I didn't respond, not because I didn't care, but because for the first time in my life, I didn't know what my role was supposed to be. I wasn't the failure anymore. I wasn't the disappointment or the black sheep. I was stable, successful, capable of helping. And yet I felt myself resisting, because for so long the only attention I got from my family came packaged in disappointment. The only time I was ever asked about my life was to measure how far I hadn't come. And now that I was somebody, the call came. Of course it did, but I didn't scream, didn't hang up. I just said I'm sorry to hear that, and let the silence carry. After a beat, she added, You know, we always knew you were smart. We just didn't think this would work. I almost laughed, but it wasn't funny. It was tragic. Because what she meant was, we didn't believe in you until someone else did. I ended the call politely, wished them luck. Then I went into that product demo and closed a $120,000 deal. No tears, no bitterness, just clarity. That day, Mara looked at me and said, You good? And I said something I didn't even plan. Yeah, I'm not angry anymore. I'm just done waiting for them to catch up. If you've ever waited for someone to believe in you before you allowed yourself to fly, hear this. You don't need them to clap. You just need to land. Tell me below, what belief are you done waiting for? Where have you decided to bet on yourself instead of asking for permission? If you're still watching, this part is yours. The next move I made was the boldest yet. And it didn't come from ambition. It came from peace. Hoi ChatGPT. I was sitting on a rooftop in Brooklyn when it hit me. Not a breakthrough, not a big idea. Just quiet. The kind of quiet that only comes after a long storm, the kind that makes you realize you're finally undeniably free. Lineform had just onboarded its 100th active business account. We'd hit $500,000 in ARR. Our churn rate was low, our user reviews were glowing, and investors were still circling like seagulls above a beach picnic. But I wasn't chasing validation anymore. I was finally chasing vision. That night, as the city glowed below me, Mara handed me a beer and said, Okay, founder, what now? And I told her the truth. I want to create something bigger than software. I want to create a system where people like me, like us, don't have to be extraordinary just to be taken seriously. She didn't say anything right away, just nodded. Then she said, Then let's build it. That's when the idea for the Next Gen Fund was born. A micro-grant plus mentorship platform for young founders with non-traditional paths. No degrees required, no pitch decks, no venture lingo. Just a real product, a real mission, and a story that mattered. But before we could even file the paperwork, I got an unexpected notification. New LinkedIn message. Michael T. Ha, Senior Strategy Officer, Elevate Capital. Hi, Avery. We've been following Lineform closely. We believe there's massive untapped value in your market segment. We'd love to initiate a conversation about potential acquisition or strategic partnership. Looking forward to connecting. I read the message 5 times. This wasn't just another investor email. Elevate Capital was a real player, a firm that made headlines who turned quiet startups into household names. Just last quarter, they'd acquired a similar B2B logistics company at a $28 million valuation. I forwarded it to Mara with one word, thoughts. She wrote back immediately, only if it's our terms. And that's when I realized something. We weren't underdogs anymore. We were a threat. The following week, I sat in a glass-walled conference room sipping lukewarm espresso while 4 suits in blazers nodded at my slide deck. They used words like scalable infrastructure strategic alignment and post-money projections. I used one-word mission. They offered a number, $9.4 million. I didn't flinch, didn't blink, but my heart did pause. That number in the eyes of 19-year-old me was unfathomable. It was security. It was proof. It was freedom. But it also came with strings naming Wright's new leadership product pivot. They wanted the engine, but not the soul. So I said no. Politely, clearly, firmly. And the moment I walked out of that office and back into the cold Manhattan wind, I realized that might have been the moment I actually became a CEO. Not when we hit our first 100K. Not when we got the press. But when I said no to something everyone else would have killed for because I knew what I was building was worth more than their spreadsheet logic. Mara met me outside, so they lowballed us, I said. She grinned. Then let's build something they can't afford. That night, I walked home alone through Soho thinking about how close I'd come to trading it all just for someone else to tell me I'd made it. And here's what I need you to know if you're still here, still watching. Your worth isn't a number. It's a compass. And if yours is still pointing forward, then you're not done yet. Tell me in the comments, have you ever said no to something everyone said you should say yes to? What made you trust your gut? Where did that choice lead you? I want to hear it. This wasn't the finish line. This was the foundation. And everything that came next was mine to define. There's a strange kind of silence after turning down millions of dollars. It's not the kind that screams doubt. It's the kind that dares you to do something bigger, bolder. And I did. The very next week, I filed paperwork to establish the Next Gen Fund, a micro-grant and mentorship initiative for under 25 entrepreneurs without traditional academic backgrounds. It wasn't a marketing move. It wasn't about branding. It was a personal promise. To the version of me that once cried over a blinking cursor in a freezing apartment, praying someone somewhere would just take a chance. We built a tiny site, simple form, real names, real stories. In the first 48 hours, we got 213 applications. People from Detroit, Tulsa, Albuquerque, rural Maine. Artists, coders, bakers, welders. Some had been homeless, some were single moms. A few had already started businesses out of food trucks or basements or neighborhood garages. And all of them had one thing in common. They were tired of asking for permission to matter. Mara and I read every single application, by hand. And when we chose the first 5 recipients, we didn't just wire them funds. We called them, spoke to their families, asked what they really needed, not just financially, but emotionally. One kid, Jeremy, 19, from Savannah, broke down on the call. Said he'd never had anyone call him by name and say the word founder before. He'd built a home security alert system from salvaged electronics and was trying to sell it door to door. He didn't need millions. He just needed a door that opened. And we gave him one. Meanwhile, Lineform kept growing. We landed a contract with a regional health foods chain. I was invited to speak at a panel on unconventional founders at South by Southwest. Mara got quoted in a TechCrunch piece that called her a design genius hiding in plain sight. But my favorite moment, I got a text from my little brother Jonah. It was a screenshot. Mom had shared my Next Gen Fund article on Facebook with the caption, "Proud of what she's building, even if I don't understand it." That sentence, short, awkward, maybe even reluctant, meant more to me than anything I'd heard from her in years. I didn't text back. I didn't need to, because something had shifted. Not just in them. In me. I no longer wanted their approval. I wanted their respect. And the truth was, I already had it. Not in their words, but in their silence. In the fact that for once, they weren't trying to fix me. A few weeks later, I was watering the tiny basil plant on my office windowsill when Mara turned to me and asked, "Do you ever feel like we're building something people are too afraid to name?" I asked what she meant. She said freedom, and she was right. We weren't just building tools or platforms. We were building exit routes for people stuck in cycles of expectation, validation, permission. We were handing over keys, and maybe that's what made what happened next so ironic. Because as I leaned more into that freedom, my family suddenly wanted back in. It started with a voicemail from Dad, then a text, then an email. Each one softer than the last. Each one skipping over the years of silence like they were minor footnotes instead of formative fractures. And finally, one message hit different. It came from Mom. Your father and I would like to visit. Not to talk about the past, not to argue, just to see you. No expectations, no lectures, just your parents. I didn't reply right away. I sat with that for days. I asked myself not if I forgave them, but if there was anything left I needed from them. I wasn't sure, because forgiveness isn't always a reunion. Sometimes it's just a release. But eventually I said yes, not because I wanted their praise, but because I was finally whole enough to hear anything and still not lose myself. If you've ever had someone come back into your life after years of absence, if you've ever had to decide whether to open the door again, you're not alone. Let me know in the comments. Did you let them in, or did you protect your peace? I want to know what you chose and why. Their visit was coming, and so was the moment I never thought I'd be ready for. Facing them, not as their daughter trying to explain, but as the woman I became anyway. I chose the cafe carefully. Not too fancy, not too casual. Outdoor seating, soft jazz humming from inside, sea breeze drifting in from the Gulf. I didn't want anything too performative. No conference rooms, no power lunch settings. Just neutral ground. Human ground. It had been nearly 4 years since I'd sat face to face with both of them. 4 years since that dinner where I'd stood up from our kitchen table and walked away without slamming the door. Now they were the ones walking into my space. I arrived early, ordered a cold brew, sat at a table with a view of the shoreline, checked my phone, read nothing. Then at exactly 9:00 a.m. they arrived. My father, Marcus, moved more slowly than I remembered, his hair grayer, his shoulders less square. My mother, Denise, wore her usual beige cardigan, clutching her purse a little too tightly like it was holding together her composure. They spotted me, walked over. I stood up, gave a nod. No hugs. We sat, silence at first, not hostile, just unfamiliar. Finally, my dad cleared his throat. I read your interview in Founders Weekly. I raised an eyebrow. Didn't peg you for a startup magazine reader. He gave a small, almost embarrassed smile. Someone forwarded it. What you've built, it's impressive. I nodded. Thank you. My mother placed her hand gently on the table. It took us a long time to understand that. You never needed to be anyone's copy. I looked her directly in the eye. You don't have to say that if it's not true, I said, voice calm, measured. I didn't come here for another polished apology. I came to see if you can finally sit with the real me without trying to edit her. She looked down. In that moment, I saw something shift. Not guilt, not shame, but softness. The armor cracking just a little. Then my father said something I didn't expect. You once asked me why I couldn't see you as the pride of this family, he said, his voice low. I didn't have an answer then. I do now. He paused. You were proof that I was wrong. I didn't say anything, just looked at him steady. I hadn't come for vindication. I had come to witness the change if it existed. And in that moment I believed it did. But here's what I didn't do. I didn't throw open the doors. I didn't rush to hug them or cry or collapse into old roles. Because healing doesn't mean pretending the wound never happened. It means knowing you can walk back into the same room and not bleed this time. We stayed another 20 minutes, talked about the weather, about Jonah and how he'd started a landscaping business, about how they were considering retiring somewhere warmer. They asked about line form. I told them what they could understand, left out what they couldn't. As we got up to leave, my mother reached out, not tightly, not desperately, just a quiet hug, tentative but real. I let her. Then they left. No drama, no big declarations. Just the sound of their steps retreating down the brick path and the low hum of the sea behind me. I didn't wave. I didn't look back. I just stood there and let the sun touch my face. And you know what I realized? That was closure. Not the kind where everything's fixed, but the kind where you stop needing anything more from people who can't give it. Because I no longer lived for their pride. I lived for my peace. If you've ever had to redefine what family means to you, tell me. Who became your family after the ones who were supposed to show up? Didn't drop a comment. Share your truth. You never know who it will set free. And as I walked back to my office, my team waiting, my inbox full, my life firmly in motion, I knew something with absolute certainty. This chapter wasn't about proving anything anymore. It was about choosing. And I was finally choosing me. Sunday dinner had become a ritual. Not the kind I grew up with, starched shirts, perfect manners, everyone silently trying to impress the man at the head of the table. No, this was different. Ours was messy, warm, filled with laughter, passed bowls of roasted vegetables, shared bottles of cheap wine, and stories that ran too long. The table was in my own backyard now. Strung lights overhead, a long reclaimed wood bench, dishes from mismatched thrift store sets. People I chose to be there. Mara always showed up early, barefoot, playlist in hand. Jared, one of our newest hires, brought whatever his grandma had baked that week. Caleb usually brought dessert and corny jokes. We weren't family by blood, but we were mine. And that night, after everyone left and the dishes were stacked high in the sink, I sat alone under the porch light scrolling through emails on my phone. One subject line stopped me cold. Application Forge, Forward Fund, Alicia Monroe, age 22. El Paso, TX. I clicked. Her idea, a scheduling platform for rural clinics, built entirely in Notion and Google Sheets. She didn't have a CS degree, never even took a formal programming class, but she'd already tested it with 2 clinics in her town. They said it cut their no-show rate by 18%. At the end of her application, she wrote, "I didn't think I'd apply. My resume is just high school. But something about how your story was told made me think maybe I should try." I reread that line a dozen times, and then I cried. Not big movie-style tears, just the kind that sneak out slowly when you realize you became the person you once needed. We awarded Alicia a $20,000 grant. She called us crying, saying she thought the email was fake. I told her the world doesn't need another polished resume. It needs what you're building. A few days later, TechPulse ran a feature on the Forge Forward Fund, called it a rebellious response to Silicon Valley gatekeeping. And while the article buzzed online, I got another unexpected message, this time from Natalie, my sister. I hadn't spoken to her in years, not since that dinner, not since she'd looked at me and scoffed, "You code at home and suddenly think you're a CEO." The text was short. "It's me. I'm not calling to beg. Just wanted to say, thank you for everything. And I'm sorry. A real sorry." My fingers hovered over the screen. And then I responded, "Thanks for saying that. Nothing more." But something subtle shifted. Not a reunion. Not redemption. Just a thread. Quiet and human. And for the first time in a long time, I wasn't dreading the past. I was just done carrying it. Because healing had stopped being about them. It had become about the version of me I now got to live as. The one who danced barefoot in her kitchen while dinner roasted. The one who built software that actually made people's lives easier. The one who answered emails from kids who thought they were too late before they even began. I didn't need to go back and fix anything. I just needed to keep going. And if you're still listening to this story, maybe that's you too. Maybe you're somewhere between broken and beginning, between silence and forgiveness, between what you were taught to be and who you actually are. Let me tell you what I've learned. You're allowed to outgrow your origin story. You're allowed to rewrite the rules, draw new blueprints, build new homes, literal or emotional. Have you ever had to start over, not with a blank slate, but with all your scars and truths and questions still intact? Drop a comment. Tell me about your beginning. Your finally. Your this time I chose. I want to hear it. Because this story, it's still being written, and it doesn't need anyone else's permission. 2 years into running Lineform, I was no longer the girl hiding in a cramped apartment, no longer the outsider in a family that couldn't understand her. But that didn't mean the past stopped knocking on my door. In fact, one crisp autumn morning, as I was preparing for a major product launch, my phone buzzed with a message from my mother. It was brief, but it carried the weight of years of silence. "Avery, your father and I are coming to Florida next month. We want to see you." I stared at the screen, heart pounding. The woman who once dismissed my dreams now wanted to visit the home I had built with my own hands. It was the kind of moment you dream about, yet fear the kind that tests everything you've become. I didn't respond immediately. I needed time to decide how to show up. Would I be the daughter they once rejected, or the CEO they could no longer ignore? When the day came, I chose a small, quiet coffee shop by the shore. The ocean breeze softened the morning chill, and I arrived early, nerves tucked beneath my calm exterior. They came on time, my parents looking older, softer, but still tentative. The first few moments were filled with awkward silence, the kind that comes when two people stand on different shores but want to bridge the gap. My father broke the silence, complimenting a recent interview I gave. "What you've built. It's impressive." I nodded, grateful yet guarded. My mother reached out, placing her hand gently on the table. "We're sorry for not seeing you sooner, for not understanding." I looked at her, eyes steady. "I didn't come for apologies. I came to see if you could accept me as I am." Her eyes lowered, and I saw the truth, love tangled with regret, and the hope for a new beginning. We spoke quietly about small things, weather, the neighborhood, even my sister's kids. Not everything was resolved. But a door opened. When we parted, my mother hugged me gently without trying to change me or my story. It was the first time I felt that hug was real. And as they left, I didn't wave goodbye. I simply stood there, breathing in the salty air, knowing that whatever came next, I had already won. Have you ever had to meet someone again, not as who they hoped you'd be, but as who you really are? Share your story in the comments. Let's create a space where acceptance isn't conditional. Because in the end, it's not about proving them wrong. It's about being true to yourself. And that is freedom. After that meeting, life didn't suddenly become perfect. In fact, the real challenge had just begun. For years, I had lived two separate lives, one of silent struggle, the other of quiet ambition. But now it was time to merge them. At Lineform's headquarters in downtown Clearwater, Florida, sunlight poured through floor-to-ceiling windows, illuminating the bustling team that had grown from two scrappy coders to a full department of passionate innovators. Our software was no longer just a tool for small retailers. It had evolved into an ecosystem integrating AI-driven analytics, inventory, forecasting, and personalized marketing, all tailored to empower the underrepresented businesses that had been overlooked by Silicon Valley giants. I had stepped fully into the role I'd once feared: CEO, leader, visionary. And with that role came responsibility not just to my company, but to the community that believed in me. I launched initiatives to mentor young entrepreneurs from non-traditional backgrounds, ensuring that those who lacked fancy degrees or privileged networks could still access the resources they needed. One such program, the Forge Forward Grant, had already helped dozens of founders across the country, young people who, like me, refused to let their circumstances define their futures. Yet, despite the success, my relationship with my family remained delicate. Conversations were cautious, interactions measured. Old wounds hadn't fully healed, but the edges had softened. During family dinners, now less frequent but more genuine, we spoke less about expectations and more about understanding. I realized forgiveness was not a single moment, but a process, a choice made daily to release resentment and embrace growth. In that journey, I found peace. I also found purpose. Because my story was never just about me. It was about all of us who dare to dream differently, who fight invisible battles, who redefine success on our own terms. And for those still watching this story unfold, here's my hope for you. You don't have to follow the path laid out for you. You don't have to fit into the mold others carved. Your worth isn't measured by their approval, but by your courage to stand in your truth. Wherever you are on your journey, know this: the hardest battles often lead to the most beautiful victories. Share your story with me below. Let's build a community where every voice is heard, every dream honored. Because sometimes the greatest freedom is simply becoming who you were always meant to be. By now, the story of Lineform wasn't just mine, it had become a beacon for many who felt unseen or unheard. In a bustling tech event in Tampa, I met Caleb Meyer, a consultant specializing in digital transformation for nonprofit organizations. Our first conversation started with data integration and AI potentials, but quickly turned into something far more meaningful. Walking barefoot along the beach one evening, sharing earbuds and childhood playlists, we found common ground in dreams that transcended backgrounds and degrees. There were no questions about success or failure, just genuine connection. For the first time, I didn't have to hide who I was or the path I'd taken. I was whole. Together, we envisioned building not just a company, but a movement, one that embraced diverse talents and unconventional journeys. The launch of the Forge Forward grant was more than funding. It was a declaration that brilliance can bloom anywhere. The response was overwhelming. Hundreds applied in weeks, each story a testament to resilience and untapped potential. Alicia Monroe, a 22-year-old from El Paso, became the fund's first recipient, developing a scheduling platform for rural clinics. Her tears during our first video call reminded me of my own fears and hopes as a teenager. Our community was growing, connected not by pedigree, but by passion and purpose. Yet amid the triumphs, old ties still stirred. Natalie, my sister, reached out with a heartfelt apology, sincere and raw. Though I didn't rush to rekindle our relationship, I began responding cautiously on my own terms. No longer shackled by the need for family approval, I was free to choose who I let in. And that choice was empowering. Have you ever had to redefine family or rebuild bridges on your own terms? Share your experience below. Your courage might just light the way for someone else. Because in the end, freedom isn't just about breaking away. It's about building new connections that honor your true self. The journey to this point was paved with hard lessons. One afternoon, as I watered the lavender in my backyard, my phone rang. The caller ID read Natalie. Her voice was softer than I remembered, lower, less guarded. "How have you been?" she asked. We spoke cautiously, neither rushing nor retreating. She wasn't asking for forgiveness or favors. She simply wanted to say thank you and apologize for not seeing me sooner. That conversation didn't erase the years of silence, but it started a new chapter. A chapter where understanding replaced judgment and empathy began to fill the spaces left by pride. Over the following months, I cautiously reconnected, not fully, not yet, but enough to feel the possibility of healing. I learned that family isn't always perfect or easy. Sometimes it's messy and complicated. Sometimes it requires patience, boundaries, and courage. And sometimes it's about knowing when to hold on and when to let go. I've realized that the most important family I've built isn't defined by blood. It's the people who see me, respect me, and stand with me. The friends, mentors, and colleagues who've walked beside me through every late night and breakthrough. They are my chosen family. And they've taught me that the truest freedom comes not from approval, but from love and acceptance. Wherever you are in your own story, know this: you have the power to create the family and life you deserve. Share your journey with me below, because your story matters. Healing isn't linear, but it's worth every step. Standing on the porch of my Florida home, I reflect on the journey, the heartbreak, the triumphs, the silent battles fought in dimly lit rooms and quiet moments. I'm no longer defined by anyone's expectations. I'm not here to prove anything to my past. I'm here to live fully, freely, and authentically. The woman who once packed 3 bags to leave home with nothing but a dream has built an empire. But more importantly, she's built peace. Peace in knowing that success isn't about trophies or money. It's about being unapologetically yourself. It's about choosing your path even when it means walking alone. And it's about knowing that the love and respect you deserve don't come from anyone else's approval, but from within. I've learned that forgiveness is a gift you give yourself. Not for them, for you. Because only when you let go of resentment can you truly soar. My story isn't unique. It's the story of millions who've been told they're not enough. who've been pushed aside for being different, who've been doubted, dismissed, or dismissed. To you watching now, know this. You are enough. Your dreams are valid. Your path is yours alone. And the courage to walk it is the greatest freedom you'll ever know. If this story moved you, if you're ready to embrace your truth and break free from what's holding you back, share your thoughts below. Let's build a community where every voice matters and every dream is honored. Thank you for listening. The journey continues. There comes a moment in every journey when the noise fades away, and all that remains is the quiet strength of knowing who you are. For me, that moment was not marked by applause or recognition, but by the simple act of standing tall in my own truth. I've learned that life isn't about meeting others' expectations. It's about embracing your own story with all its twists, scars, and victories. Freedom isn't a destination, it's a daily choice. A choice to forgive not because others deserve it, but because you deserve peace. A choice to walk away from the shadows of doubt and step into the light of your authentic self. To build not just a career, but a life that reflects your deepest values and passions. If there's one message I want to leave you with, it's this. Your worth is not measured by your past, your family's approval, or society's standards. It is measured by your courage to be yourself, to rise after every fall, and to keep moving forward even when the path is uncertain. Thank you for sharing this moment with me. May your own journey be filled with love, resilience, and the unshakable confidence to live life on your terms.